Action Research Proposal by Susan Fraser. The two main core values that I hold are trust and equity. It is critical that you trust the people that you are working with and use trustworthy and reputable sources throughout the process. Equity is also an essential value to consider when conducting research. It is important that all participant needs are considered so that they are all on the same level and are treated equally. In addition, it is important that a diverse range of participants are selected for the study. My philosophical worldview is social constructivism. I prefer to formulate my opinions through interaction with others, and I also recognize that my own background will shape my own perspective on situations, and therefore prefer to make sense of the meanings others have about the world. You will see that this worldview guides the type of research I selected for this research proposal. The topic I chose for my research is positive reinforcement. I chose positive reinforcement as a topic because of the experience I had in the first week of my most recent teaching block. I was finding it very difficult to manage my grade 6 students' behavior and wondered if implementing a positive reinforcement system using extrinsic rewards might improve student behavior and engagement overall. So the first thing I did was find out what types of rewards would motivate the students by giving them an All About Me survey that I created. Once I had the data collected, I went and purchased several prizes and created individual classroom coupons. I brought in a ballot box, which you can see in the photo here. And after reviewing with them what good behaviors actually looked like and agreeing on that, I explained that when a good behavior is demonstrated by one of them, they will receive a ballot. And then at the end of each week on Fridays, names would be drawn from the box for prizes. This first strategy that I tried worked incredibly well. The students' behavior improved incredibly, and the class as a whole was working much more cooperatively. So I continued with this throughout the remainder of my placement and did not change anything to it because it seemed to work perfectly well for this particular class. My research question has changed several times since the very beginning of taking this course. At the beginning of the course, I was going into my placement with the idea that I might want to do something that surrounded inclusive education. However, once being in the class, I realized that that specific question would not work for me to actually have some experience with it. So I wanted to change it to positive reinforcement, like I mentioned before. In the end, my question is, what forms of positive reinforcement are more effective in supporting classroom behavior? I formulated this question with my grade 6 class in mind. The first definition is positive reinforcement, which is the changing of behavior using positive reinforcement, which is given after the desired response. So when using positive reinforcement, you present a motivating item such as a prize to the person after the desired behavior is demonstrated. The idea here is that this will encourage the behavior to continue in the future and in the long term. The next definition is social constructivists. Social constructivists have the assumption that people search for understanding of the world in which they live and work. People create multiple subjective meanings of their experiences that propel the researcher to look for the complexity of views rather than the narrow meanings of ideas. Student engagement. This refers to the degree of attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, and passion that students show when they are learning or being taught, which extends to the level of motivation they have to learn and progress in their education. Intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. With intrinsic motivation, the motivation to engage in a behavior arises from within the individual because it is intrinsically rewarding. So I would be motivated to complete my math homework because it's going to, in the long term, improve my math skills. And that's the reward in itself. This, however, contrasts with extrinsic motivation, which involves engaging in a behavior in order to earn an external reward or to avoid a punishment. Summary of the literature review. The first article that I explored was called Improving Behavior Through Differential Reinforcement, a praise note system for elementary school students. The purpose of this article is to show the effectiveness of positive reinforcement by rewarding students using a praise note system. I thought that this article would be useful for my research question because the authors examined how teaching good behaviors explicitly can make a difference, and also how using praise can make a difference. I would like to try both of these strategies in the future to see if I get a similar or better result than what I have already tried. I did explicitly talk about the good behaviors, but I didn't actually do a full lesson on them, so that would be something I could integrate in the future for sure. The next article I reviewed is called Extrinsic Reinforcement in the Classroom, Bribery or Best Practice. The authors in this article used database findings to examine the debate surrounding using rewards to increase positive behaviors. So it's been a debate for a while. There's a lot of supporters for using rewards to improve behavior, and there's also a lot of people who disagree with that. In this article, though, the authors conclude that there is minor detrimental effect when using external reinforcements. They do offer best practices, though, to use in the classroom, such as not rewarding students for more participation in a task without regard for the actual quality of the work. They also suggest not to give rewards on a single occasion, and also to be sure to select the target behaviors and ensure that the expectations for that behavior are clear, and only reward when that criteria discussed is met. They also suggested using a reinforcer preference surveys, which I thought was neat because without reading that, I did create one myself in placement, which worked great. The last article that I reviewed is called The Effects of a Peer-Mediated Positive Behavior Support Program on Socially Appropriate Classroom Behavior. I chose this article because it highlights the results from using social and verbal reinforcement instead of a tangible physical reinforcement, which was what I used in the classroom during my block. This article will aid in comparing the different forms of positive reinforcement, which is an important part of this research question. The first data source that I selected is Student Questionnaire. By using a questionnaire, I am hoping to learn about what will motivate each of my students to improve classroom behavior so that I can create rewards that suit their needs specifically. This is an example here on the right. This isn't the actual one that I used with my class, but it's quite similar. So you want to ask them about what their favorite things are, what are some activities that they'd be interested in, books, things like that, that you could possibly use as rewards. Both the students and the teacher are involved in this process, and the questionnaire ideally will be developed by the teacher and given to the students to fill out over one class period. You could always give more time if they're unsure about some of the sections. The teacher will then review the questionnaires and input the results into a chart for easy access when selecting new rewards. The second data source I selected was observation and anecdotal notes. I am hoping to learn how the potential rewards offered motivate the students to behave well. Additionally, I am hoping to learn how effective different strategies and activities used are to improve student behavior. Again, both the teacher and students are involved in this process, and ideally the data will be collected on an ongoing basis and for one full term at least. Notes will be made in between lessons when possible and at the end of each school day. And at the end of each week and month, the notes will be consolidated to make for easier review. The final data source I selected was student journals. I'm hoping to learn about how the students feel about the strategies and activities used to improve their behavior. This really relates back to my social constructivist viewpoint. I really like to know how the participants are feeling and thinking about the actual activities. I'm also hoping to learn how their feelings might change over time as well. Both the teacher and student are involved in this process again, and the students will make a journal entry at the end of each week, and they will do this for at least one full term. The journal will be looked at the end of each week by the teacher, and the teacher will make notes about how the students feel and add them to the teacher anecdotal notes just to create a much fuller picture. Validity and ethical considerations. I will ensure reliability and validity of data collection by triangulating my data. I will collect data using a questionnaire, which gives me prompt information, by making observations and anecdotal notes from my own perspective, and by collecting journal entries for my students, which will allow me to see their perspective. Ethical considerations. I will receive informed consent from each student before participating. In addition, I will be clear in explaining all of the details of the research so that there is no uncertainty. Thank you so much for listening to my Action Research Proposal presentation. I hope that you found the information valuable and it's something that you could use going forward when doing your own research in the classroom.